What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another Monster Hunter World video, and today we are taking a look at top 5 best hammers in Monster Hunter World. Now, these are heavily based on my opinion, and honestly I've done a lot of research into the differences between all the hammers, and I've come up with these 5, and I personally think they are the best, and I hope you guys find they are the best too. Alrighty, so let's jump straight into the list. Now, coming in at number 5, we have the Barroth Breaker 3. Now, this weapon is pretty amazing. Not only does it have a very high base damage, it also gets up into blue sharpness, which with hammers is very rare because they normally sit around the green sharpness. You can boost it with handicraft, however, it's not really recommended with hammers, but it also has a negative 10 affinity, which obviously isn't that great, but you can easily buff that out by inserting weakness exploit skills onto your armor and weapon pieces. Now, it also has the hidden element of paralysis at 390, which is a pretty solid amount of paralysis. However, there are other weapons that you can use for paralysis. So this Barroth Breaker 3 weapon is a great weapon for starters that have started off in the Monster Hunter world, starting off with bone bludgeons and then working their way slowly up into the high ranks. The Barroth tree is a great way to get started on the weapon, and it is a great way to get introduced into the hammer because of its high blunt. Its defense bonus as well comes in handy if you're having trouble taking on specific monsters. You can utilize that defense bonus and get extra defense. Now, as well as that, it also has 2 slots for gems, which is a great booster to your skills that you want to have with the set that involves your Barroth hammer. Now, in comparison to the weapons such as the Diablos Shatterer 2, you can see that the Diablos Shatterer lacks an extra slot like the Barroth one does. It also has an extra 15 affinity. So you can see here with this armor set that we actually get a 5 affinity bonus. That's just with our armor. We also get the damage buffed up by an extra 140 points in comparison to what the original hammer damage did. So that's why this hammer is really good for, you know, just getting into the high rank weapons and whatnot. If you can't afford to get the Diablos weapon, then the Barroth weapon is definitely the way to go in terms of hammer usage. And it's just a great, powerful all-round weapon. It has plenty of raw blunt damage, and it lacks any elemental damage. Now, do take note that we don't have the non-elemental boost gem on this build that we're currently running, which is probably why as well. If you have that gem, you are managing to be able to hit a lot harder than what you can currently see us hitting for. But other than that, it's just a solid all-round weapon. Like I said, it is a good substitute for the Diablos Shatterer if you can't afford the Diablos Shatterer. And majority of the time, you will be hitting the monster in the head. We should be aiming to hit the monster in the head with hammers. So the negative affinity won't have much of an effect here if you are utilizing the proper equipment skills. So I would definitely recommend the Barroth hammer, and that is why it is at number 5 on this list. At number 4, we have the Ragefire Magda Floga. Now, this weapon here is the Zora Magdaros weapon, and you can pretty much craft it after you get a Zora Magdaros gem, or even after you've completed the main storyline. But you can see here it has a huge amount of base damage at 1144. It only goes into green sharpness, however, that is a little bit of a downside. You can boost it slightly with the handicraft skill, but if you are running a double Diablos armor set, you actually get the bonus for having the green sharpness, which allows you to deal more damage. Now, it does have negative 20 affinity, but like I said, all these negative affinities can easily be countered by using weakness exploit and attack boosts and even agitator to boost your affinity up and even hitting them in the head, which is where you should be targeting as a hammer user. So you're definitely going to want to be aiming for the head using any of these hammers, and it has 420 blast element, which is a huge amount of blast element. Now, the only downside to this is that the hammer does not hit as fast as some of the other weapons, such as the dual blades, the sword and shield. So you are at a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of using blast damage here, but that's still not going to stop it from dealing heaps and heaps of damage to your targets. Now, as well as that, it also has a 20 defense bonus as well as a large gem slot for any gems that you want to implement into your builds, and this can make a great explosive build. You equip an Apothecary Mantle as well as this weapon, and you'll be dealing huge amounts of blast damage to your targets. Now, with this weapon, I find that sliding down the hills and doing the jump attacks is what works best with it, because that is obviously how you get the most hits in, as well as that you can also use the spinning attack as well, because you manage to get a lot of hits in with that if you're not getting too busy stun locked from the creature's roar. So this weapon, like I said, is a great dealer of damage. You can see how much damage we're actually hitting. We're not too far off our main weapon that we use with our hammer set. So, you know, you definitely can take that into consideration when choosing this weapon, but it is hands down one of the funnest weapons to use, just because of that extra blight damage. You can see there, the poor Raytheon does not stand a chance. We just managed to deal one bit of that blast damage, but at 420, you can see that you're still able to implement quite a lot of blast damage, but you're going to want to use a lot of hits. So obviously your spinning bludgeon attack and your front flip of doom, as I like to call it, is your best bet for those kind of attacks. You can see here we're able to inflict the blight once again. So it's all dependent on what you want to use as a hammer user. As hammers, your best bet is just to go for the raw blunt damage, but blast is also an effective tool to use against monsters. At number 3, we have Maladys Fist III. Now this is a great weapon to use as well, because it easily enables you to get up into the high rank section of Monster Hunter with using a paralyzing hammer. Now the reason I say that it's good to use a paralyzing hammer is because you're going to be able to stun the monsters on top of your extra stun attack, and that allows you to deal a whole heap of extra damage on top of your regular stun. But you can see here the Maladys Fist has 390 paralysis, 832 raw damage, a very decent amount of blue sharpness, and 20 affinity. Now as well as that, it also has 3 augmentation slots, but it does not have any gem slots or defense boost, which is a little bit lackluster, but it is still nothing to frown upon. This is a great weapon to use against monsters because, like I said, you're able to paralyze them as well as stun them at the same time. You equipped a set that actually boosts your paralysis element, and you'll be able to stun lock the monsters into death very easily. And you can see here, it's absolutely demolishing the poor Rattlebine. Once you manage to inflict that paralysis, you can then use the Big Bang on its head, and that'll pretty much deal an extra 500 damage, depending on what armor set you're running and how much extra critical attack you can do and whatnot. But it's a great weapon to use for that paralysis bonus, and it's a great team player. If you're running this solo, it's probably not the greatest weapon to run solo. However, if you are hunting with other hunters, then it is definitely one of the better weapons to use while hunting with a team, because you can essentially stun the monster and then paralyze them and then just do a whole heap of damage, and the rest of your team can then help. You can see here the Rattlebine is stunned, and that gives you about 8 seconds of extra damage, which is plenty enough time to pull off an extra Big Bang attack. It's a great move to use, and I would definitely recommend using this weapon. The hammer that comes in at number 2 is Obliterations Footfall. This is Nergigante's ultimate hammer weapon. So as you can see here, you've got Nergigante's base weapon, and then it upgrades into its final form. Now this weapon is a great weapon to use because it not only has an extremely high base attack damage, it has a huge amount of blue sharpness, which is great. Now the only downside to it having so much blue sharpness is that you can't increase it with handicraft. However, with that much blue sharpness, you don't really need to worry about that too much. It has 0 affinity, which is also great. It doesn't have any negative affinity affecting it, which means you'll get extra crit attacks in, as well as having 120 dragon element on it and a high Elder Seal. Now for those of you that don't know, Elder Seal is essentially what prevents Elder Dragons from using their certain abilities. So the Kushala's Wind Barrier, the Teostra's Flame Barrier and whatnot. This prevents the Elder Dragons from using that. It also has a small gem slot on it as well as one augmentation slot. Like I said, this is just an all-round great weapon. It has a really large amount of base damage and, you know, a small amount of elemental damage, which is great to use on Elder Dragons, as well as the high Elder Seal. Now, you could argue that the Pandemonium's Root can easily replace this weapon. You wouldn't be wrong there. It all comes down to personal preference. I prefer the Nergigante's final weapon in comparison to the Pandemonium's Root, just because Nergigante has the higher base damage as well as more sharpness than Pandemonium's Root. Pandemonium's Root does have more element damage, but its Elder Seal is also lacking, but it does have a larger gem slot. So it all comes down to personal preference with this one. I really like the way that the Pandemonium's Root looks as well. You can see it kind of there behind our little character screen. So it all comes down to personal preference. But then you have Obliterations Footfall, and it's just such a powerful weapon. Now this weapon would greatly benefit from sets that increase elemental damage as well as affinity. You can see there we currently have a base affinity of 15, which is plus 15 from what the original weapon has, as well as an extra bit of attack damage due to our attack boost buff that we have. But this weapon is just an all-round great weapon. Like, it has a huge amount of damage. Its element is also great. It's just an all-round great weapon, especially for the Elder Dragons, as well as dragons weak to the dragon element. So just take that into mind when you get a dragon hammer, because most of the time hammers don't really need elements. They're more of a base raw damage thing. But like I said, this hammer has one of the highest raw damages in the game. Now, as well as that, this hammer also looks really cool. Like, look at the design of the hammer. I really like how the spikes come out of it. It's just an all-round great weapon. So that's why, for this particular reason, that Pandemonium's Root is number 2 on this list. Now, hands down, the best hammer of them all is the Diablos Shatterer 2. This is a great weapon, especially if you're using it with 2 pieces of the Diablos armor, because you essentially get a bonus for using green sharpness throughout the whole time. Now you can see here, it only has a tiny bit of blue sharpness, but a lot of green. Its base damage is nuts. It's 1196 base attack. Now its affinity as well is also on the little bit of the low side at -25, but you can combat that, like I said, using certain sets of armor and attacking the head. As well as that, it has a medium-sized gem slot and 15 defense bonus, as well as 2 augmentation slots. So it's just a great weapon. It is the highest hitting hammer out of all of them, and it does look very cool when using it. However, you just have to take into mind of that -25 affinity. Shouldn't affect you too much as long as you focus on hitting the head and equipping armor that is able to mitigate the -25 affinity. Now, if you see here, we'll come out of our little screen there. You can see we have 1336 attack and -10 affinity. Now, with this current build that we have going for our hammer, this is the main set that we use. You can see here, we get attack boost, which is what combats some of the affinity, as well as agitator. So this is obviously when the monster is angry. That'll also grant us extra affinity. Now this here grants us +30 affinity when hitting weak spots. So already our affinity is at 20% positive. So it's just a great set to use, and I would definitely recommend getting into the Diablos Shatterer if you haven't got it already. It is hands down the strongest hammer out of all of them, in my opinion, and because it doesn't have any element, you can use it on any enemy you'd like to and not have to worry about any negative effects from it. And you can see here just the pure damage that this weapon is able to inflict. It hits like a truck. It's a very dangerous, very hard-hitting weapon, and it is definitely one of my favorite weapons in all of Monster Hunter World. Now, you can currently see that we are hitting the Wraithian in the head for multiple points. That is pretty much negating our negative affinity that comes with the weapon. You can see that we just hit it for 140 and managed to break apart. Now, a set that benefits greatly from this weapon is the non-elemental boost. That'll also boost up your damage by quite a bit, as well as slugger and attack boost. You want to try and get those gems and those armor pieces that grant you those skills, because that's obviously what's going to grant you extra attack and affinity, as well as the agitator skill. Much of these are from Nergigante. You can also get them from another few set pieces. And you saw there, 128 on the secondary, and here comes the big bang. And you can see just how much damage we are doing from it. Now, we also have Agitator on. We don't have any food skills eaten, but it just hits like a truck. And you can easily fell most of the Elder Dragons using a hammer. Though, watch out for Korshala Deora. He is a big pain in the butt to use the hammers on. But that'll pretty much be my list today, guys. Let me know what you thought of it down below. Let me know if you agree with it. Let me know if you think I missed any of them. I did spend a lot of time farming all the materials that I needed to craft all 5 of these weapons, and let me tell you, it took quite a bit of time. So like I said, let me know if you enjoyed the list down below. Let me know if I missed anything once again, but you can see there, just the pure ferociousness of this hammer is enough to slay anything, honestly. You can kill most monsters in all of Monster Hunter World with a Diablos Shatterer hammer. So, that'll be it for today, guys. Let me know what you thought of it down below. Subscribe for more, and don't forget to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Got this soda,